With the addition of Padme to the game, a lot of people are wondering whether they should invest in a Galactic Republic team. There's reports from the Game Changers that Padme teams can beat Darth Revan and Jedi Knight Revan teams. But one problem I've noticed with their playtesting is that everyone is using Gear 12 Plus with God tier 6 dot speed mods and all the Zetas. Well, that might be helpful if you're a whale, but what about like everyone else? A lot of people didn't have their Separatists ready and couldn't unlock 7-star Padme. And Padme has one of the highest, if not the highest, gear bottlenecks this game has ever seen. And this team requires a lot of Zetas, which many people just don't have enough to give out. And lots of people don't have super mods with God tier speed. So how does a 5 or 6-star Padme at lower gear levels without God tier speed mods perform? How does she do in other game modes like Grand Arena, Territory Battles, Territory Wars, or the Sith Raid? We haven't seen much footage or playtesting besides top tier Arena. Sometimes if you want something done right, you gotta do it yourself. I have a low geared Padme without God tier speed mods and without all the Zetas. I took it upon myself to playtest various Galactic Republic teams in Arena, Territory Wars, Territory Battles, Grand Arena, and the Sith Raid against as many common teams as possible. I don't have all the Zetas and all the characters at Gear 12. So here's what I'm gonna do for this video. First, I'm going to go through the characters showing my mods, gear, and Zetas, explaining what their roles are in the team and how to use them, and giving my opinions about how to mod and upgrade them. Next, I'm going to show footage of me playtesting Padme against as many common teams as I could find, showing how to play against them, which teams to avoid, which teams she counters, and personal thoughts and advice. Finally, I'm going to do a summary and the final verdict on whether or not it's worth investing in. However, I need to tell you right now, spoiler alert, if you're going to upgrade this team just because you want a reliable counter to Darth Revan and Jedi Knight Revan, do not upgrade this team yet. I'm telling you this now because I don't want you to potentially waste resources. Watch this video, look at the data, look for other people playtesting this, and then make your decision. The results I found are different from the Game Changers, and I'll show you and explain everything. Also, a disclaimer of sorts, I was one of those weird people who upgraded their Separatists like way back in the day because I thought they were cool and hoped they'd get a rework. 2 years later, it seems to have paid off because now they're getting reworks and I'm sitting here with a shiny new 7-star Padme. But I was only able to get her to Gear 9 due to the terrible bottleneck, and that's even with giving her one of the special gear pieces I was saving for the return of Darth Revan. Also, I followed Mick Mull's video for modding this team, which I'll link in the description, but I ended up changing a couple things as I was playtesting, so I'll show you that. I'll put timestamps for every topic in the description and the comments so you can skip to any topic you want. With that being said, let's get to it. Starting off with Padme as the leader, her most important abilities are her leadership, her unique, and her special ability Cunning Plan. You want to pop off Cunning Plan as much as possible because not only is it a mass heal and cleanse, but it gives your team two of the most important buffs, Protection Up and Courage. After using this ability, everyone has so much Protection Up that they're practically invincible, and when it's their turn, it turns into Courage, which is used to then deal crazy damage. This brings us to important tip number 1. Courage is this team's main source of damage, and without it, they hit like pool noodle wielding toddlers at a pool party. But they're not even old enough to swim without their floaties and parental supervision, so they just sit there and cry. But when they do have fat stacks of courage, they can practically one-shot anyone. So it's all about popping off Cunning Plan at the right time so your guys can take a turn and then decimate the other team. And I mean like so much damage that even Barriss can one-shot someone with her basic. The Zeta on Padme's leadership is completely essential. Resisting all debuffs and being immune to crits while having Protection Up is way too good to pass up and makes this team very, very tanky. Having the Zeta on her unique means Galactic Republic allies gain 40% Protection Up whenever an enemy attacks out of turn. This just screams anti-CLS teams and any type of counter-attacking or swarm-attacking ability. If you're fighting a team that has a lot of attacking out of turn, then this is essential. You might be able to get away with not having this Zeta if you save Padme for offense and are very selective about who you fight. But if you want her to be a lot more useful and put her on defense, this is a very defensive team after all, then you need this Zeta. Regarding mods and gear, you want her to be as fast as possible so she can do cunning plan as much as possible. You also want her to have as much health as possible so the protection up she gains is higher and she'll survive longer. I found that if Padme dies off early in the battle, this team is dead in the water without the extra protection up and the damage from courage. It's very unlikely you'll win on offense if she's taken out early. At low gear, she is very vulnerable. If she was gear 12 with 6-dot mods, she'll gain a ton of bonus health and become way more tanky and be faster. Having her at gear 12 is a huge advantage and changes this team a lot. And I can show you what happens when you don't have her at gear 12 when we look at the footage. Next up, we got Anakin, who you think would be the main damage dealer, but that's not really the case. The main damage dealer on this team is anyone with a lot of courage. Even when modded for high damage, he doesn't hit very hard, so the damage on this team really relies on courage. His most important abilities are his special overpowering assault and his unique. His special debuffs the enemy team when Padme's alive, so it's critical she stays alive. It also gives some protection up and can't be evaded, so great against buff enemies and evasive teams. One of Anakin's main jobs is buff clearance. His Zeta means Padme takes a bonus turn after Anakin takes one. Anakin's only taking a bonus turn if a teammate falls below half health. I would describe this Zeta as insurance. If your team is in trouble and someone's about to die, Anakin will attack and Padme will be able to do a swarm attack or give some protection up with a basic, or hopefully use her middle ability to heal everyone up and get the protection and the courage going. It's insurance for if the battle is not going well. In all of my playtesting, I did not have this Zeta, but I think if I did, it probably would have saved my team at least a few times, so actually I recommend this Zeta over some of the others. Having insurance is nice. Regarding gear, I actually didn't take him to gear 12 until most of my playtesting was complete, and he did just fine at gear 11. But again, being able to slap on 6-dot mods would help a lot. I followed McMull's mod plan for him regarding mods, and it seems to work well. But even using speed mods or even health mods to make him more tanky and fast would work too. Next up is Kenobi. Under Padme, he is ridiculously tanky and practically impossible to kill with swarm attacks. He's one of the best tanks in the game and really helps out the team in every possible way. His Zeta is designed to help him taunt more in a Padme lead team, and I think one of the most important Zetas on this team. Kenobi's been out for a while, so I do have him at a solid gear 12.5 and decent mods. However you mod Kenobi for other teams that you usually use him in should work just fine here, so you probably don't even need to remod him. As long as you have good health and speed on him, he's good to go. Next up is Ahsoka, who has an interesting role. She might be listed as an attacker, but in this team, she's not really. Even when modded for offense or crit damage, she hits like a wet noodle, because again, this team's damage comes from courage. Without it, they all hit like wet noodles. You might think that modding her for damage and all her bonus attacks from her Zeta would up the damage on this team, but she doesn't really hit that hard, and I don't think that's her job. On a crit, her basic debuffs herself and a random Republic ally, and also debuffs the enemy. Her Zeta means that she'll be attacking constantly, and I think this is a vital Zeta if you're going to use her on this team. I ended up remodding her strictly for critical chance, since that will help her accomplish her main job. Her middle ability seems like it would also do good damage, but not really. This ability heals a bit and gives some protection up, so just use this ability like a weak heal or a high damage attack if she has courage. Overall, Little Snips deals only a little bit of damage. Her main job is keeping debuffs off your team, clearing buffs and taunts off the enemy team so you can hit who you need, and providing slight heals. She's not an attacker, she's a support. Last but not least, you have the wild card, the mysterious 5th slot that needs to be filled. The best Galactic Republic candidates right now are C-3PO, R2, Grandmaster Yoda, and Barriss. Yoda's great for spreading buffs and foresight if you have the Zeta, and dealing good damage. I think Yoda is the best choice, especially if you're using Padme in Arena. However, in Grand Arena, Territory Wars, and for raids, you probably need Yoda on another team, so my choice for second best is Zeta Barriss. She makes the team even more tanky and hard to kill when they run out of protection and helps keep debuffs off. Great defensive choice, and probably the best choice in Territory Wars and Grand Arena. C-3PO is good for the extra buffs, enemy debuffs, and swarm attacks. Good for offense against specific teams, and for raids. R2-D2 will provide stealth and passive bonuses to everyone, and if you have the Zeta, then all allies cleanse debuffs off themselves on a crit. You could totally use R2 in place of Ahsoka if you don't have her geared up yet. I had the most luck using Yoda and Barriss, but subbing in R2 and C-3PO for others you don't have or can't use at the moment should work too. I also tried Jolee as 5th since 3 other members of the team are Jedi. I think this could work defensively, but I didn't have much luck with it on offense, maybe due to the fact that he's not Galactic Republic and doesn't gain all the bonuses. Also, you usually need Jolee on other Jedi teams, so personally I don't recommend him. I also find it odd that they made a Galactic Republic Jolee for the event. I wonder if they intentionally designed Jolee to somehow not work well. It's time for playtesting! We're going to start with various common teams and do this alphabetically. Starting with Bastilla Jedi. Padme appears to be a strong counter. Both teams are very tanky, but Padme can blast through their defenses with courage. Meanwhile, the only real threats you might typically find on a Jedi Bastilla team would be Grandmaster Yoda or Ezra, but they still have a hard time taking out even your lower health characters like Ahsoka and Padme. I'd feel pretty safe taking a halfway decent Padme team up against a very good Jedi Bastilla team. Bounty Hunters Bossk lead. I say Padme is a hard counter. They apply very few debuffs, which means bounty hunters can't gain health and protection. Only Boba can really deal good damage to your team with Execute, and your stacks of courage can eat through them quickly. They can't apply debuffs or thermals, which they rely on heavily. Victory is usually only a matter of time. CLS lead teams. Padme is usually a strong counter to CLS teams. They can wail on Kenobi all day and not even scratch his health. The protection up counters the bonus damage they deal. Generally, the battles are quick and decisive. Yoda and Barriss are usually the best since Yoda can steal their buffs and Barriss takes more turns and people recover health when they're crit. Excellent anti-Han and Chewie. However, you can still lose. I've only lost a couple times and I was shocked and scratching my head until I watched the footage back. CLS teams gain turn meter when their debuffs are resisted, so they'll gain lots of turn meter and take lots of turns as they wail on your team. Chewie is actually the most dangerous to your team because he can mass dispel all your protection up, leaving you vulnerable and not able to counter with much damage. He also does bonus damage based on max health. Always take out Chewie first. CLS can also dispel, so watch out for that. This brings up another important point. Your worst enemies cleanse your buffs. Chewie, Scion, B2, or anyone else who can cleanse or prevent protection up on your team is a huge threat. No protection means you can die sooner, and it means no courage, which means no damage. Take these characters out first or prevent them from taking turns. Carth lead teams or Old Republic teams. Definitely a hard counter. You can come across a variation of this team in Territory Wars or Grand Arena, usually involving Wampa or Darth Vader or a full Republic team. They rely on damage over time effects which can't stick to your team, so it's definitely a hard counter. And here we have Darth Revan. A lot of people want to know how a low gear Padme does against the mighty Darth Revan. Unfortunately, I can't climb quite high enough to get to the Malaks on my server, but I was still able to fight some Darth Revan teams. My verdict is, it depends. If your Padme outspeeds their team and can get protection up first, you can usually wipe out a Darth Revan team pretty easily. First, you resist all their debuffs with a protection up and the tenacity if you use Yoda. Then you can wipe out Scion, Dark Bastilla, or Thrawn if they have him. You can take Darth Revan out quickly if you target him with a couple well-timed attacks with big stacks of courage. However, if Darth Revan uses Insanity and fears your whole team, or Scion debuffs your whole team, this usually goes completely the opposite, and you get absolutely destroyed. So in summary, yes, you can beat him if you're faster and block their debuffs. But if you're slower,
don't try it!
Next up we have Ewoks. I say Padme is a hard counter. Ewoks rely on bonus attacks and swarm attacks, so they just won't be able to damage your team enough, especially if you have the Zeta, and especially if you bring Barriss or Kenobi who will protect you from crits. Low Grey is the biggest threat due to being able to debuff your team, but besides that, you can wipe them out pretty quickly and easily. First Order Kylo Ren Unmasked lead. I would have preferred to test against a Kylo Ren Unmasked team with Executioner on it, but when you don't have a test account, you gotta take what you can get. Padme is definitely a hard counter because First Order relies on debuffs to heal. Padme teams don't really apply many debuffs, can tank the damage they dish out, and they can't do much to stop the stacks of courage from forming. Only Kylo Ren Unmasked Executioner and Kylo Ren Unmasked himself can strip debuffs off a single character, which isn't enough to stop everyone. A mediocre Padme team can definitely take out a good First Order team. Next up we have General Grievous droid teams. My verdict is, he's a worthy opponent. This team can usually resist all the debuffs Grievous and his droids can apply, but by far one of the most dangerous threats to you is B2. He will constantly strip you of protection, which means no courage, apply buff immunity, and allow other droids to put target lock on you and get their turn meter train going. B2 is definitely your priority, followed by B1 to stop the heals. General Grievous gets very dangerous at the end since you usually can't target him until the end, so he'll usually kill one or two of your guys before he goes down. If you don't prioritize your kills or get stuck behind marks, you can lose against Grievous. However, I think a good General Grievous team is able to go up against a good Padme team on defense and win, as long as you keep B2 alive and prioritize your targets. Imperial Troopers. I'm gonna say a strong counter. Troopers aren't usually on defense, but if they are, they usually use a lot of counter or swarm attacks based on which troopers are present. They can deal lots of damage, but if you use Kenobi and Barriss, it's hard for them to really hurt you. If you take Imperial Troopers against Padme though, outspeed them and manage to kill or hurt someone, and if the other team has the Anakin Zeta, Anakin would immediately strip your buffs and Padme would immediately take a turn, so even if you do get the jump on them, things could go south. Personally, I would not take a good Imperial Trooper team up against a good Padme team. And here we have Jedi Knight Revan, another moment you may all be waiting for. Can a non-maxed out Padme team beat a top tier arena Jedi Knight Revan team reliably? My answer is a very strong no. I have lots of footage trying various comps against various Jedi Knight Revan comps, and I can definitely say it is very hard to win. Here's why. Since Padme isn't Gear 12 and is usually the weakest member of the team, the AI tends to target that character, which means she ends up getting marked and taken out early often. If she's taken out, you can't really win. Most of the times I lose, it's because she gets taken out and there's not much you can do about it since Revan can ignore taunts with Mark. Although the protection up saves you from swarm attacks and a lot of extra damage, the buff immunity and insane damage that can come from Yoda and Revan can really hurt you. They can't do too much to prevent courage, but even with courage they are tanky and can also be revived, so it's still a struggle. The only times I was able to win was against non-traditional Jedi Knight Revan teams without Jolie, or one time against a traditional meta team. In the few times I won, my team was faster and I was careful in planning out how to use my courage to target and take out Yoda, Revan, and Jolie. However, if my team was Gear 12 Plus with 6 dot mods and all the Zetas and Godspeed mods, my team would be significantly tankier and probably be able to withstand any damage they could throw at me. This likely explains why Game Changer testing was saying Jedi Knight Revan teams struggle defeating Padme teams. It only happens when they're Gear 12. So in summary, if your Padme team is maxed out, you can take out difficult arena meta Jedi Knight Revan teams. However, if your team is not maxed out, you can't. Do not invest in this team if you are looking for a Jedi Knight Revan counter and can't max out this team. Jedi Training Rey teams. I'm gonna say strong counter. On offense, Anakin strips all their buffs and they can't hurt you too much with the swarm attacks. Although Rey and Resistance Trooper can debuff you and C-3PO can prevent buffs if he can get confused to land, it's pretty easy to focus them down one by one and wipe them out. Rey may be able to take out Padme on defense, but I haven't been able to play test it. If I'm able to test it in the future, I'll post the results in the description and the comments. Night Sisters, my verdict is a solid counter. Night Sisters can't usually apply debuffs, which they rely on. The biggest threat is Asajj, who can cleanse your buffs and deal good damage. Battles with Night Sisters usually take some time, but I tested a variety of teams and didn't lose once. Padme is a good counter to Night Sisters. Padme mirror matches. I'm actually going to say a strong counter. The AI isn't usually smart enough to focus down characters and time courage well, but you can. I tried a couple different comps and found out it was pretty easy. Kill Padme first and use Ahsoka to debuff Kenobi whenever he taunts. After that, just focus them down one by one. Palpatine lead. Are the rumors true? Does Palpatine ruin Padme teams? Oh god, does he ever? Please stop! Vader usually outspeeds you, applies the debuffs, and the turn meter train leaves the station while you're tied to the tracks. Sion on this team is really bad too, and keeps the protection up off of you. However, I tried using C-3PO on the team as the fifth wheel, and it was a night and day difference. He prevents the turn meter train from taking off, and I had to research why this works. So, according to this part of the kit, Galactic Republic allies gain 15% protection up when they gain a different, non-unique non-protection buff. So when Vader does his area of effect damage, every person crit gains Kenobi's crit immunity, which means they also get protection up, which then prevents any debuffs from being applied. I don't know why it happens in that order, but it helps Padme teams, so I'm not complaining. Since we have protection up and they can't apply their debuffs, it's a fair fight and I can win a lot more often. Make sure you take out Scion and Nihilus first so they don't strip your buffs or annihilate you. So overall, you can win against Palpatine if you use C-3PO, but it's still a little bit dicey, so generally I'd avoid it if you can. Phoenix teams. Padme is a hard counter. I like to think of Phoenix teams as a blend of First Order and Rebel CLS teams. They're rebels and use a lot of counterattacks and assists, but heal from debuffs like First Order teams. Padme is a hard counter to First Order teams and a strong counter to CLS teams, so it makes sense that she can handle Phoenix teams without much issue. Zeb and Ezra both have an attack that debuffs you, but honestly there's not too much to worry about. I faced a Phoenix team that was Gear 12, fully Zeted, and with faster mods than me, but it was still pretty easy. Traya lead teams. All I have to say about this is... don't try it! I was able to win like twice against a Traya lead team using Nest on defense, and the other one was with Thrawn and Sith Trooper, but that's it. If you're going against a meta top tier arena Traya team, especially with Dark Bastilla or Thrawn, I don't know if you can even win. They shut down your team way too easily with Fracture and Isolate and strip your protection, which also means no courage. You can't do enough damage, your team is in disarray, you're stuck behind Scion, you can't deal enough damage to stop Nihilus from annihilating you, and the debuffs from Dark Bastilla cripple you. It's ugly, it's messy, and it's usually over quick. Although you may be able to win if you get lucky resisting debuffs and timing courage nicely, I'm gonna say Traya is a strong counter to Padme teams. That does it for the teams right now. For territory battles, she's very good. Protection up protects you and courage kills them. Any tier, click auto, go play outside. I found that she works well with a bunch of clones too. I'm hopeful there's maybe something special here and that in the future she could lead other types of Galactic Republic forces and not just Anakin, Snips, and Kenobi. I think having a Padme lead with clones could be a promising offensive team in territory wars or territory battles, but I need to test more comps. Sith Raid. My guild can only do tier 6, but from what I've tested, it's very average on all phases besides phase 2. It does well in phase 2, but there's a lot of teams that do well in phase 2, so personally I don't think it's a huge deal. My best run, I was able to get 6.8 million using 3PO as the 5th. Not too bad, but if 3PO doesn't escape, then you can't use him with other teams. So I'll try other subs for him and see if I can get similar damage. Regarding playtesting her defensively, I don't have a buddy to do that with, and all the times I saw another Padme on defense in Arena, I used that as an opportunity to get a bigger sample size of Padme mirror matches. I put her on defense in Grand Arena once and my opponent couldn't beat it, but they also took 4 tries trying to beat my Grievous team on defense, so I don't know how reliable that result is. And that's about the extent of my playtesting. So before I give my final verdict, here's a TLDR of how this team works. Padme is super important and needs to stay alive. The more she uses Cunning Plan, the more you win. Protection up means no debuffs or crits on you, and that leads to courage, which leads to big attacks, which leads to dead enemies. Ahsoka's main job is to strip buffs off target enemies and keep debuffs off your team. Anakin's job is to retaliate when your team gets hurt, strip buffs off the enemy, and apply healing immunity and buff immunity whenever he can. Kenobi's job is to tank stupid amounts of damage, protect the team from crits, provide counterattacks, and swarm attacks. Just be good old Kenobi. The best 5ths right now are Yoda, Barriss, and C-3PO, and they all have a different purpose. Use C-3PO with raids, Yoda for arena, and Barriss for territory wars or grand arena if Yoda isn't available. All Zetas are required to have the most effective team, but you can get away with not having 1 or 2 if you just use them as counters to specific teams. Don't bother modding them for damage because they all hit like wet noodles. Mod them for health so they gain more protection up and stay alive longer, and speed so they can potentially get courage faster. Let courage do all the damage work. A lower tier Padme team is not a reliable counter to Revan or Darth Revan. Do not invest in them as a counter to Revan or Darth Revan unless you can get Padme and friends to Gear 12 and give the team all the Zetas and 6-dot mods. When someone on the team has fat stacks of courage, they are the damage dealer. When they don't deal much damage. So, after all this, I think I have a final verdict. Padme is a hard or strong counter to the following teams: Bossk lead bounty hunters, CLS teams, JTR teams, Ewoks, other Padme teams, Night Sisters, First Order, Old Republic, and Imperial Trooper teams, with potentially many more. However, she's very expensive and requires lots of intense gear and a stack of Zetas. If you're willing to invest only some resources, you can still counter a large amount of teams and have an ace in the hole kind of team for many different occasions in Grand Arena, Territory Wars, and she can help you with light side territory battles and part 2 of the Sith Raid. Also, with the new territory battle coming out, she'll undoubtedly be useful for a special mission and also be a great help in dominating this new challenge. But only if you are willing to invest all the resources. This will be one of your best teams hands down and can take on the Revan brothers. Overall, I'd say it's a pretty good team to invest in and they're fun to use. I hope you found this information helpful or at least entertaining and hope it guides you into spending your resources wisely. Thanks for watching. I'm posting a Star Wars Galaxy of Heroes related project soon and it's going to be really cool. So subscribe if you want to make sure you see it. But I also post non-Galaxy of Heroes related stuff too, so don't get mad.